Today we come to put a wrap on our series by applying the things that we have learned about how to make the most of our lives to the way that we actually live. We want to figure out what can we do to actually put this into place in our lives. And we've acknowledged in this series that we all have a list for how to make the most of our lives. But based on Jesus's radical redefinition that the way you gain your life is by giving it away, what we've done in this series is we have proposed and identified 6 adjustments that we need to make to our list so that it reflects Jesus' own priorities, so that you and I can follow him and obviously live our lives like him. Now, I know that we've been through spring break, life happens, everyone couldn't make every one of these weeks, and so I just want us to quickly review the 6 adjustments that we proposed in this series. In week 1, we said don't base your list only on what you can see. Jesus came to tell us that there are realities beyond what we can see in eternity that will actually determine whether or not we make the most of our lives. In week 2, we said, make sure not to make excuses that cause you to miss the moments whenever Jesus comes near in your own life. Because there are some moments that when they're gone, they're gone. They never come our way again. Then, in week 3, we reminded ourselves that it's possible to get our list right and still get our lives wrong if we don't act on the Word of God so that it can act on us. It is able to help us make the most of our lives, James said, but we actually have to act on it. Then in week 4, Jamie reminded us of the importance of walking in the Spirit and that we want to do that so that our wants don't overwhelm our list. In week 5, Chad told us, he said to make sure that you don't talk yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into. You may remember that he spoke about Zacchaeus and Zacchaeus standing up and saying, I'm going to give away half my wealth. Zacchaeus was taking a huge risk, and Jesus did nothing to talk him out of that. In fact, he told a parable to talk him into probably going into personal bankruptcy. And so we said, be sure you don't talk yourself out of what Jesus is talking you into. And then last week we saw that that we need to make sure that our list can not only survive suffering, but it can actually help us thrive in the midst of it. Because the Apostle Paul told us that if we suffer with Christ, there is actually incredible benefit attached to that, not only in this life, but in the eternity and the life to come, that the benefits are simply out of this world. They're unbelievable as we become co-heirs together with Christ. And so these are the 6 adjustments that if you and I will actually live them out, they will help us make the most of our lives. But this begs a question. If we know the adjustments that we need to make to our list, why is it so easy for you and me to get our list right and still get our lives wrong? Well, part of the answer to that question is that it's not always easy to do what's on our list. And one of the reasons for that is that life is often coming at you and me very fast. I mean, just look at how the world has changed since we began this series in late January. Ukraine has been invaded. Sanctions have upended supply chains and markets even further. Geopolitical alliances are being reshaped. Tens of thousands of people are suffering. Over 3.7 million people have left Ukraine as refugees. 10 million, they anticipate, have been displaced in the country. People have died, deaths that no one expected them to die in early 2022. The threat of nuclear war has once again been invoked by major world powers. Y'all, there is even talk now of the possibility of food shortages, and in a general uncertainty has settled over the globe that you and I call home. Maybe you have even seen your own life rapidly change. Life has come at you fast since late January. Maybe there's been a change in your health or your career or your relationships or your financial picture. Maybe something happened to you that you didn't anticipate. And even though life tends to sort of plod along, most of the time, that's the way it happens, we all know that life can change in a split second. And so how are you and I supposed to get our lives right? How are we supposed to make the most of our lives when life is coming at us so fast? How do we take the ancient advice that Jesus gave us and that the scriptures give it and apply it in the modern world where we live right now? We want to try to answer that question today. Now, one of my fondest memories as a kid was playing baseball in Little League in North Olmsted Falls, a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. And probably the reason I have such fond memories of it is that I was an all-star. Now, I know I'm bragging, okay, but bear with me for just a moment. I was the best pitcher in the league. We played 6-inning games. That meant there were 18 possible outs. I regularly struck out 15 of those 18 batters. Nobody could hit me. It was unbelievable. You should have seen me. All right? Not only that, I had the best batting average in the league. I hit over 700% as a batter. And y'all, I was only 11 years old. So just remember, there's nothing worse than when grown men brag about their athletic prowess of yesteryear, right? So no one cares. I get it. It doesn't matter. But just for the sake of comparison, the very best baseball players in the world, major league players, on average only hit around 245. Now, for those of you who really don't follow baseball and you don't care, what that means is that the best players in the world only get a hit 1 out of every 4 times that they come to the plate. I mean, how is that possible? If I, as an 11-year-old, could get hits 3 out of 4 times, how is it that the best players in the world only hit it 1 out of 4, since they are astronomically better than I ever was? Well, it has everything to do with just how hard it is to hit a major league fastball. Science shows that there simply isn't enough time for the human brain to do it. Here are the facts. The pitcher's mound is only 60 feet 6 inches from home plate. But by the time the pitcher does his windup and releases the ball, his hand is only about 55 feet from home plate. A fastball traveling at 95 miles per hour over that distance only takes 400 milliseconds to arrive. Now, it takes the human eye 100 milliseconds. They've tested this. It takes the human eye 100 milliseconds just to pick the ball up. Then it takes your brain 25 milliseconds to tell your body to swing. It takes 150 milliseconds to actually swing the bat and uncoil your body. And that leaves only 125 milliseconds to gauge the pitch and to decide whether or not you should swing at that pitch. Now, just to put this into perspective, I want everyone to blink right now. Be aware you're blinking. It takes 300 milliseconds to blink. It's fair to say that based on the science, it is essentially impossible, or it's just sheer luck, if you ever hit a major league fastball. Now, What does all of that, I mean, how can major league players do it all the way? I mean, if it's that impossible to do, how can they actually do it? And what does their hitting a fastball have to do with you and me making the most of our lives? Well, if your batting average in baseball revealed your batting average in life, and you only got a hit one every 4 times that you tried, there would be no way that you could make the most of your life. You've got to be better than that. Clearly, we don't want to base our lives on sheer luck, and none of us wants to believe that it's impossible to make the most of our lives. So how do we do a better job at consistently living out the 6 adjustments that we've seen in this series so that we can follow Jesus and make the most of our lives? Well, the answer lies in how major league players actually hit 95-mile-per-hour fastballs. Yogi Berra said, you can't think and hit at the same time. In other words, if you're trying to think through hitting a pitch after it's already left the pitcher's hands, there's no way that you can possibly do it. And the same thing applies in life. If you're trying to figure out how to handle life once it's already coming at you, you're too late because life happens too fast. But there are 3 things that the pros do to hit these major league fastballs. The first thing they do is they have way better than average eyesight. The average player in the major leagues has 20/12 vision. In fact, it's one of the qualities that scouts look for when they're deciding who to draft on their team. The second thing that the pros do is they get a head start on every pitch. You see, the pros actually begin to uncoil their hips and their body and make the swing before the ball ever leaves the pitcher's hand. And then the third thing that they do, and they say that this is the ultimate trait, major leaguers are actually able, they say, to see into the future. Our brains can actually anticipate information that it hasn't seen yet. Researchers at UC Berkeley prove this by what is called the flash drive effect. And the brain, what they learned is that the brain can predict the movement of fixed dots in a sphere that is rotating before the movement actually happens. So how does great eyesight, getting a head start, and seeing into the future help you and me make the most of our lives? Well, I want to start with those of you who are young and single. You finally made it out of the house, right? You're on your own. Yes, right? But you may have already learned that life's not quite as easy as mom and dad made it look. The great challenge of being single is being single. You're facing life on your own. Questions about money and relationships and other things are coming at you pretty fast. And you may not be getting quite as many hits as you thought you would. In fact, you may have already struck out a few times. So how does what major league players do to hit a fastball help those of you who are young and single make the most of your life? Well, the first thing is, remember, major leaguers have incredible vision, but none of us have that kind of vision when it comes to life. Life is too big, it's too complicated, it's coming at us too fast. But God has this amazing attribute called omniscience. It means that He knows all things, and with it, He has foreknowledge, which means that He knows before things happen, He knows what is actually going to happen. And if you and I could see life through His eyes, our vision would be greatly improved and we'd hit a lot more fastballs. So how do we see life through His eyes? Well, this is not news to us. This is why Faith Bible Church is called Faith Bible Church. We know that the Scriptures actually help us to see life through God's eyes the way He sees it. The Scriptures reveal God to us, and they also show us how God sees our lives and the lives of others and the broad history of this globe on which we live. One example of this is what Solomon said about the book of Proverbs that he wrote. He said, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand what? Words of insight, to give prudence to the simple and knowledge and discretion to the youth. Y'all, reading and meditating on the scriptures, consistently hearing good, solid Bible teaching is pretty basic, but what it does is it gives you and me insight about how to face life when it's coming at you fast. Now, for most of you, this is not a new thought. I mean, just simply by the fact that you attend a Bible church means that you already have this on your list. But I want to remind you, it's possible to get your list right and still get your life wrong. The only way that we actually get our list right is when we do what we know to be true. And so that means that if we want to see life with God's vision, with His point of view, with His insight, you and I have to have basic, regular ways to get the Word of God into our lives. This is basic and it's fundamental. But we need more than insight. We also, to make the most of our lives, we also need to get a head start on making important decisions before they ever come up. This is what major league players do. They begin the swing before the pitch is ever released. There are some decisions that you simply cannot make in the moment. If you do, you'll strike out every time. And one of the most obvious ones of this kind of decision regards sexual intimacy. If you wait to decide what the limits are in the moment, your wants will overwhelm your list. When we lived in the highlands of central Kenya, one of the things that Linda and I instituted on Friday nights is we did this thing that we called a Gentile version of a Jewish Seder service on the Sabbath, right? And that starts on Friday night at sundown. And so on Friday night at sundown, we would get ready to eat the best meal of the week. And after the sun had set, we would gather around the table. Linda would light the candles. We would quote a Bible verse. We would sing a Kiswahili song that said, Bwana Mungu ukai nasi. Then I would tell a Bible story. And after that, our family, all of us together, we would quote our family confession of faith. And that was our Friday night tradition. It's what we did. Our son Ben was 10 when we started this tradition, and about 12 years later, it paid huge dividends. Now, Ben has always been a really good-looking guy, and for a lot of reasons. He's got a great personality. He gets along well with people. People like him. He is good-looking. But when he was 22 years old, y'all, I'm just telling you, he was a stud. I mean, I look at myself and it's like, where did he get it? Because I know he didn't get it from me. And it turns out Ben was a swimmer in high school, and he was good. He could run a 5-minute mile, and he was a CrossFit coach, which meant that he was doing CrossFit all the time. And he attracted the attention of a married woman who propositioned him. And I can just tell you that most 22-year-olds would not have hit that fastball. But Ben did, and here's how he did it. He said, I asked him, here's what he told me. He said, when we were doing our Friday night Seder services, one of the stories that I had told was the story about Joseph being propositioned by Potiphar's wife. You remember that story? And just day after day, she kept on him. She said, sleep with me, sleep with me. And he kept refusing, but then one day, here's what happened. It says, but one day when he went into the house to do his work and none of the men of the house was in the house, she caught him by his garment saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and he fled and got out of the house. And when I told this story on our Friday night services, I tagged it like this. I said, when you are faced with an immoral decision, just get out of there. And when I asked Ben how he was able to handle this moment, he told me that he remembered that story and he just got out of there. Ben had a 12-year head start on that fastball, And it's the only way he could hit it. If you want to make the most of your life, there are some decisions that you have to make ahead of time. Am I going to make it a habit to call in sick when I'm not sick? And that might not seem like a very big decision, but it's reflective of your actual character. What kind of character are you going to build? Am I going to sleep with every guy or girl who looks my way? Am I going to rack up thousands of dollars of credit card debt like most Americans do? Am I going to walk away from church when my parents aren't there to make me go? Am I going to be generous with my money, or am I going to spend it all on myself and consume it like many people do? Life comes at us fast. Some decisions have to be made in advance if you want to make the most of your life. But maybe the greatest advantage to hit life's fastballs is the ability to see into the future. And one of our biggest advantages of life coming at us fast is maintaining perspective. This is a hard thing to do. It's a challenge. Whenever life is coming at you fast, it's like that fastball gets right in your face, and it's all you can see. You can't see anything else. You can only see that moment and how you feel about it. And what happens is you get so fixated on that situation that you lose perspective, and y'all, that is often whenever we make poor decisions. It's so easy for one of life's fastballs to completely overwhelm our list when we can't see anything else. But do you remember what Jesus did for his 12 disciples? When he called them to suffer and to go to Jerusalem with him, he told them about future realities beyond what they could see. He told them that in the future he would come, he would return, and he would reward them at the judgment seat of Christ for how they'd lived this life. Picking up on that very same theme, last week we saw that Paul said we could actually be co-inheritors with Christ, the firstborn Son of God and the only born Son of God who will inherit all things. You and I can be co-heirs with him if we suffer with him in this life. That is perspective. God's prophetic word takes us up to 30,000 feet and reveals to us a grander eternal perspective. And it's this eternal perspective that helps you decide what to do with life's fastballs. You realize, of course, that every pitch that comes to you shouldn't be swung at. There are some pitches that we ought to let go on by. We ought to pass on them, and perspective helps us know when to swing and when to pass. Should I date this person? Swing or pass? Should I marry that guy? Swing or pass? Should I take that job and move out of state? Swing or pass? Should I cut that person out of my circle of friends because they're so toxic? Swing or pass? If you were living in Ukraine, you might ask a completely different question. Should I risk to go help my neighbor whose house just got bombed? Swing or pass? The great challenge of making these decisions as a single person is that you're making them on your own. But as we saw last week, we're not actually alone. The Spirit of God has been given to us so that with God's insight from the Scriptures, the discipline of making key decisions ahead of time, and the perspective of eternity, the Spirit can function as your tutor and curator to guide you to hit life's fastballs. And that brings us to parents whose children are still at home, because you realize one day your children are going to grow up to be singles. I mean, that's actually why you're parenting them, right? So that they will move on out of the house on their own. And so everything that we've just said about singles applies to you and your kids. To use our fastball analogy, preparing your children to hit life's fastball is the fastball you're trying to hit as a parent. And most of you are trying with all your might. You're teaching your children the scriptures. You're getting them here on Sundays to get into Candy's classes together with all of her team so that they'll hear the scriptures taught. You get them here on Sunday night to get into Caitlin's Awana program so that they hear the scriptures taught and they memorize them so that they will see life from an early age as God does. You're helping them make some of life's most important decisions right now. You're trying to teach them which ones matter. And you may even be trying to teach your children to look to the future by learning to delay gratification so that they're not swayed and attracted to every shiny object that Madison Avenue flashes their way. But possibly the toughest fastball as a parent is consistently modeling for them the things you're trying to teach them. It's one thing to say what to do, and it's another thing to do it, right? Recently, our grandsons from Alaska stayed about 5 days with Linda and I at the river. And when they got back to Anchorage, our daughter sent us a video of Hudson, our 5-year-old grandson, singing a song about ice-cold long neck beer. And when she asked him where he learned it, he said, "Pawpaw taught me." I'm Pawpaw. Well, I can just tell you, I didn't teach Hudson that song. I don't know that song. I don't know who performs that song. And so I figured out, I have no idea what Hudson's talking about. I think my 5-year-old grandson just threw me under the bus. And so I pretty much dismissed it. But then the next day, it suddenly dawned on me what had happened. Living out at the river, we're in a pretty rural area. We don't have TV and we don't have high-speed internet out there. But on occasion, like you, I kind of like to veg out. And one of the ways I do that is I get my phone on Facebook and I watch these video clips of The Voice. Now, I know you're saying, he likes The Voice? Yeah, I like Blake Shelton, John Legend, Kelly Clarkson, the way they interact with each other. And I like some of the young people who come on there and sing. And one of these young country singers was named Kinsey Wheeler. And in the knockouts, he sang this really catchy country tune. It goes like this. I've had a largemouth bass bust my line. A couple of beautiful girls tell me goodbye. Trucks break down, dogs run off, politicians lie, been fired by the boss. It takes one hand to count the things I can count on. No, there ain't much, man, that ain't never let me down. And then it goes into the refrain, 'cause long neck ice cold beer never broke my heart. Don't you love country music? Well, y'all, I was so into the performance, I had no idea that 5-year-old Hudson was back there watching and memorizing verbatim the words of that song. Mom, Dad, you can do everything to help your kids get their list right, but if you get your life wrong, your kids are watching. Your children may learn from their mistakes, but most of the time, they'll simply repeat them. Consistency is the great gift we can give our children. Show them how to love God by looking out for others. Show them what it means to give your life away. Show them how to never miss a moment. Show them how to not talk themselves out of what Jesus is talking them into. Yes, teach them with your words, but you lead them with your life. More than likely, if you do, they'll hit life's fastballs. And you'll get to join the ranks of we old people who get to sit back and watch our children make the most of their lives as they follow Jesus. Which brings me to those of us in the room who are old. One of the rewards of being old is that for the most part, we no longer face the challenges that singles and young parents who are in the thick of it are facing. Now, this isn't to say that there are no more fastballs that come our way, but life isn't usually coming quite as fast for people my age and older. Unless our health fails us, we can normally live life at the pace we prefer. And it's true, life does usually move at a slower pace. You remember when you used to be able to run that sub 7-minute mile? And now you can't run a sub 11-minute mile. Pace tends to slow down, and that's a good thing. What's more, because we're old, we already have the insight we need. Because we're old, we've already made a lot of life's important decisions. And because we're old, we tend to have a broader perspective. These are the benefits of being old. Our challenge isn't so much hitting fastballs as it is to stay in the game. Last December, Dave Anderson, my mentor and the founder of Faith Bible Church, came out to my river property in Junction to hunt. And I was showing Dave around, and we were sitting in Linda's golf cart down by the rapids, looking 700 yards down the North Llano through the pecan bottom. It's an absolutely gorgeous, peaceful view. And Dave asked me a question. He said, "So, how will you know when you've gone to heaven?" And I didn't know whether to laugh or not. Because if you know Anderson, you know that he almost always has a double meaning to questions like that. He was saying, "Witte, this is a beautiful place you have," and that's true. But Dave was also suggesting that I might have taken myself out of the game a bit early. Near the end of his life, the Apostle Paul penned these famous words. He said, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." Y'all, Paul knew that the time of his departure, he knew that the time of his death was not far away. And I just want to say to most of us that we will not be surprised when we die. Most of us will know that death is facing us, that it's coming. We'll see it. It's a part of aging. It's a part of living. It's a part of dying. Most of us won't be surprised. We'll see it coming. And Paul said, because of that, because he saw it coming and he knew it was there, he stayed in the game. There was no chance that Paul was going to talk himself out of what Jesus had talked him into in Acts chapter 9 on the road to Damascus. Why? Well, because Paul could see into the future. Look at what he wrote. He said, "Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day." Referring to the judgment seat of Christ. "And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing." Paul didn't want those of us who are older to lose our perspective. Paul knew that the finish line of life is either death or the return of Christ for his church. And so he stayed in the game. And seniors, so must we. Get up every day and use your considerable gifts that you have developed over time, your energy, your resources. Use them for the benefit of others. Give your life away to the very last day. Get involved with people. Be there for young people who need your perspective. Encourage parents who are raising children and are in the thick of it. Give away what you've been given to those facing life's fastballs so that they can make the most of their lives. Y'all, I think of Casey and Melissa. Casey is too young to be facing this fastball. And yet he and Melissa, together with their boys, are hitting this one out of the park. And so can you, if You'll let the scriptures improve your vision, your insight. If you'll make most of life's decisions long before you face them, and if you will maintain a perspective by keeping eternity in mind.